Sagi Silberschatz is the CEO of Secret Vienna, a Viennese tourism company which offers unique tours and experiences about Vienna's lesser-told stories and secrets in 6 languages, while publishing a daily blog about Vienna. And Sagi is also the head of Silberschatz Consulting, a consulting firm which supports nonprofit organizations, social businesses, and startups by initiating, promoting, and scaling projects. Currently, the company specializes in security, de-radicalization, and counter-terrorism. The company's services include fundraising, strategic consulting, marketing campaigns, and public relations. His latest book, My Blind Boss, 10 Lessons of How to Overcome Any Challenge, shares the professional and life lessons he learned from his boss Daniel about using all of our senses, forming a winning team, seeing beyond what others can see through our imagination, and much more. Through this book, he hopes to make us see that limitations are truly a product of corrupt use of our imagination, and hopes to open our eyes to our potential as human beings. The unbelievably incredible skills which we may have yet to discover, and the possible meaning beyond life's harsh lessons and suffering. Sagi is always glad to connect with interesting people who initiate ideas, overcome challenges, and strive for success.
Winterland, tell me all your secrets. Fill me in on your wildest moments. Colored trees, your yellow leaves move me. Dancing moves, your painted red shakes the room. When I get there, I'll let my feet roll. When I get there, I'll break in your arms, I'll lose control. When I get there, I'll know the answer. Let me know when I get closer. Winterland, you're my sailing ship. Guide me in when you head for your trip. Right out of this wicked black and into bright sand. Straight toward the warm sun and into his hands. I'll let my feet roll. I'll break in your arms, I'll lose control. When I get there, I'll know the answer. Let me know when I get closer. Winterland, whisper in my ear, make my troubles all disappear. Way beyond this wicked black, I feel the sunset. Right under the warm sun in his hands. I'll let my feet roll. I'll break in your...
Sagi, welcome. Thank you so
Yeah.
much for being with us tonight.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for having me. Thank you for everybody that also tuned in. It's really cool.
So, Sagi, tell us about Secret Vienna and how you got into tourism.
Yeah, so Secret Vienna has quite an interesting story. Secret Vienna started in 2016 as a blog by an Italian man that moved to Vienna and had time and wanted to explore the city. At that time, I was doing other things, but our paths crossed. And when he had to leave the country, I decided to take it over. Actually, it was exactly today, July 1st, 2017. So we're celebrating an anniversary today in a way. And I decided to take this blog and transform it into a tourism company. Personally, I'm a huge history geek. I love history very much. I believe that history is the foundation of everything. And I believe that it is something that enriches people's lives. I also was very happy to deal with something that brings both meaning to people's lives and really gives them something extra, especially in life when we wait for our vacation. We live from vacation to vacation. And so in this vacation, I have the possibility to make people's lives amazing. And that's what Secret Vienna is all about. We create unique tours, experiences, workshops, masterclasses, anything from regular tours to rowing along the Danube River with canoes to learning how to paint like an Italian Renaissance artist and many other cool things. And yeah, Secret Vienna is an interesting story of evolution of a blog into a company, which I think is something unique.
And so, Sagi, tell us, do you do these tours yourself? Are you doing them in 6 languages?
Not at all, no. We are working with licensed tour guides. In Vienna, you have to be licensed. We have actually 16 guides right now. And we also work with professionals. So when we give workshops, we give them by professionals in the field. So renowned artists or designers or outdoor activity experts. So we really try to bring cool people that we handpick in order to really give people something special. For us, the quality is very important because, you know, since people wait for their vacation the whole year and then they have 1 week to enjoy, you have actually a very big role in making sure that everything works smoothly and that they're happy at the end. And yeah.
Sure, and I'm curious, so generally do the tourists or the locals, do they tell you that there's one particular thing that really shocks them or that they really like or that they're really surprised by?
Oh, they're shocked every time. Actually, about more than 50% of our target audience is locals. And I first of all, I always tell people to explore their own city in any way they can. Start by maybe learning the meaning of your street's name. When was it given and why is it named like this? And then try to choose a different route to work. That's what we try to give the people of Vienna, to give them a deeper meaning of where they live so that they can better connect and fall in love with their city all over again. We take people to places they have never been to. We integrate a lot of objects and artifacts, historical ones that we buy in public auctions, to let them touch things that they hear about. We take people underground into exclusive places that are private, nobody can enter really. And so the locals are shocked. And for us, we created the company so that we don't have to focus on customer acquisition. We don't have to focus each time on getting a new customer, but rather focus on customer retention. Because for us, we wanted that people will come to all of our tours. And we have now about 40 different tours, and we are creating new ones every month. And so for us, we wanted that people will come to all 40. And that's why we designed it in a way to each time shock them again.
Wow, that's great. Well, we have a great video here about the Napoleon tour I'd like us to take a look at.
Pretty cool, huh?
So, wow, so they're actually firing muskets in downtown Vienna?
Exactly. So this tour is very special. It's the Napoleon's tour. It's important to know that in Vienna, people hate Napoleon, right? Napoleon, on the one hand, Napoleon is the creator of Austria as a country. Because of him, the Holy Roman Empire collapsed, and instead the Austrian Empire emerged in 1806. And so the people that you saw there, our guide and his soldiers, are actually battle reenactors of the opposition to Napoleon, and basically taking people through the route of where people were when Napoleon took over, and various events that happened when Napoleon conquered Vienna. And the highlight, of course, is we end at Heldenplatz, Hero Square, a very significant place. It's also the place where the Anschluss, for example, took place, where Austria was annexed to Nazi Germany. And there we had the special permission from the police to shoot with muskets. It shocked people. I don't, if you take a look at the video afterwards again, you'll see that people are really shocked. Nobody thought we'll actually shoot. Yeah, that's what we try to do. When you witness that, that's the experience that you want people to have.
Okay. Well, I'm signing up for the Napoleon tour. So, Saki, tell us also about Silberschatz Consulting. I mentioned it in the introduction. You're also a counterterrorism expert?
Actually, that was my expertise before Secret Vienna. So Secret Vienna, it was a decision 3 years ago to take a blog over because we love history. But originally, what I'm doing mainly is related to radicalization. This is a topic that has always interested me, in particular, understanding groups, partly because of my background, and we will get to that, I guess, very soon, but also to really understand how people move on the spectrum of radicalization and how we can help people realize that their lives are more important than their group association. I became part of an organization in Vienna called Not in God's Name. I then was the general manager of this organization. And our methodology was that we used martial artists, so famous boxers, MMA fighters, actually people with belts, famous people from the Muslim world who became testimonials. They became role models for children, for people that went to the gym. We created profiles of who might become radical, who might choose a life of terror, let's say. And we realized that actually there are many things that happen to them that are related to martial arts. For example, they would go to the gym to train, to prepare themselves physically. They will look for certain role models that are devoted to the religion, but also that are capable, like fit, to fight for the ideals. And so we use the same people that they would go to integrate them better and to show them that actually it's not that the whole world is against them, but that actually they do have a chance to succeed. Many people think simply that in Austria or in Europe in general, it's very difficult to succeed if you're an immigrant or a refugee and people don't know what you've been through. And so you have to take revenge or you have to join the cause. And we show people that actually they have all the tools to succeed. And we break down all the barriers in their mind when they see people that have been to exactly the same situation as them and became champions in Europe. You know, this while being religious and being devoted Muslims, it's great that they still could do it. The organization grew very big, and then we started to be invited around Europe for explaining our methodology. And that's where I became part of a body of the European Union called the Radicalization Awareness Network. I was invited to the OSCE to give their talks, and that's basically how what I'm doing now. Now I'm focusing a lot of more research related to group dynamics and to the fact that we are all on the spectrum of radicalization. We will not take it as far as maybe actually killing people, but it influences our opinions and our behavior. And so I want to understand the extent of which our group identity influences our behavior.
So tell me, have you actually met terrorists or would-be terrorists?
Yeah, well, I guess I'd never met somebody that actually was already a terrorist, but we prevented people from becoming ones. We actually stopped people in the airport that had already tickets to Turkey to cross the border back when ISIS was at its peak. Definitely. So you meet people like this all the time. It's very complicated. These people, they believe that their ideology is the right one, but they feel the need to suppress it because nobody accepts these ideas. And so sometimes when you meet them, you have to dig deep to find out some of the ideology that is lurking there through a lot of guiding questions and a lot of sometimes provocative talks. And that's why what we created training programs and school visits where we talk to people, and then suddenly radical ideas come up and pop up. And this is the moment when we target them. So it's always funny for people when I talk to them about what I do, because I always like to joke that I'm combining tourism and terrorism, uh, which is kind of funny saying, very different worlds. But I want to make sure that you can safely travel, and then when you do, that I can offer you a nice experience. That's kind of my life.
Sure. And so, Sagi, I want to ask, as a layman, I understand terrorists are religious fanatics. They can be a Christian or Muslim or Jewish or any given number of religions or sects. Is that a correct conception and understanding of terrorism today?
I mean, there is a lot of different type of terrorism, and it's changing from just what we see on TV to things that are happening online. To yeah, it really varies. First of all, everybody is capable of radical ideologies. Who judges what is radical and what is not? Probably the group you live in and the society you live in. Some ideas that are more acceptable elsewhere are not acceptable in Europe. In general, for me, I don't judge the religion in itself. I judge the interpretation of it by certain charismatic figures that make you feel like like this is your life meaning. And that's what I'm trying to understand. How, for example, if we create alternative groups, that's what we did in our project. We created sport groups that substituted the religious groups, for example, and we tried to see which group will be stronger for them. This is basically the way that we do it. Everybody can possibly be radical. It also means that we have to be very self-aware and self-conscious about our ideas and where they originate and where they come from. Radicalization can also be political. Nowadays, you can see both right-wing radicalization, left-wing radicalization. People develop ideologies without really researching deeply about it, but forming it because of the group that they are in, that they find themselves in. You can see quite easily that people, based on where they live geographically, or based on their age or the group that they are at the moment in, what their ideology is. And so it probably means that they're not digging deep enough into their own ideology. To me, as a person who comes also from quite an ideological group to begin with, it was always very important to understand what influenced me and my behavior. And with that, it led a lot of my research and what I'm doing these days.
And Sagi, I want to ask you as a final question on this topic, if I or any member or any of our participants tonight meet somebody who we think is becoming radicalized, what do we do?
It's quite challenging. First of all, arguing is never the right way. Most of the time, it's great either to really try to dig deep in the conversation with questions, try to understand the other side. I never treat people that are radical as perpetrators, but rather as victims of the circumstances that they're in, because, as I said, since it's a spectrum, it can always move back, and you can always move it back. And so you just need to raise this awareness in people. And another thing that we love doing, I don't know if people are capable of doing that just from a casual meeting, but we love shattering beliefs like at once of people. One thing, for example, that we did, we took a lot of young Muslims from Afghanistan and from Iraq and from Syria, and we created a training program that is like a CrossFit and fitness programs. And they had to basically train with each other. They had to help each other do push-ups together. And what they didn't know is that half of the group was also Jewish, from the Jewish community in Vienna. Everybody looked the same. Everybody trained together. They helped each other press and everything. And then at the end, everybody introduced themselves. And then we asked the question, did you know that you now trained with Jews together? And at the beginning, they were shocked. They're like, what are you talking about? And they said, yeah. And I said, not only that I'm Jewish, I'm also Israeli. What do you think about this? And they said, wow, you were actually a really nice guy. And at this moment, it breaks a lot of what the ideology developed in them. And that's basically shows how radicalization is a very shallow ideology. The more you dig into it, the more you realize the flaws in what you believe, but people just don't dig enough.
So, Sagi, now we have learned a little bit, just a tiny bit about all of your activities. Now let's ask you about you as a young person and you growing up. What was it? Tell us about your youth.
Sure. I mentioned I gave hints to where I come from. So I come originally from Jerusalem, but I spent a large part of my childhood actually in settlements. Like I lived in a settlement. You probably hear a lot the word settlement in the news when Israel comes up. I lived in a place called Samaria, in the middle of absolutely nowhere, surrounded by Arab villages. And I come from a religious group that believes in living in such settlements. Childhood was amazing. It's an amazing place to grow up at. I mean, you feel very secure. You know everybody. Everybody's connected to everybody, and you feel really safe in your group. You know, people that grow up in cities or people that grow up in general in Western Europe, for example, the group identity is not that strong. You know, it's not quite it's not like quite special. Growing up in a small group that I enjoyed living there, but quickly in my life I realized that the group itself is not for me, or at least that I wanted to embrace the life of, you can say, a researcher or somebody that asks many questions. And religion and many questions not always goes well together unless there is somebody that can answer it. But most people rely on faith rather than on questions. I respect that completely. I'm very grateful for what I got from my group association. But one thing that I told myself is that I don't want to be part of groups anymore. I don't want groups to shape my behavior. I want to understand why I'm doing things on my own. I want to try out different groups and see what works for me. I really believe that it's the group that originates everything, our behavior, our meaning, our faith. And it's not that the faith brought people together. It's that people that were together needed things that will keep them together and created this faith, these norms, these behavioral elements. And to me, I realized how much of my life was not even at all my choice. You know, I try to be conscious about my actions, but I realized that it's kind of like brainwashed. Some of it was positive brainwashed. It made me a better person, but it was not a conscious decision. And for me, it was very interesting to understand that until today. So now I'm a researcher, let's say. I'm asking way too many questions, over philosophical kind of person. And now there are certain things that I cannot do because of the things that I learned in my youth. I cannot overcome the laws that are written in the Bible, let's say, in some parts, just because I cannot. And it's really interesting. So, yeah.
Sagi, so tell us, after all of this research that you've done about radicalization and extremism, would you consider the family in the area, the community that you grew up in, as extremists?
That's a really tough question. No, I would not. To me, extremism is something that is triggered the moment that you clash with another group. When you live with your group and you're not disturbed, it's an amazing feeling. You know, you really feel belong, and we all long for this our whole life. We want to feel part of something that is great and that is solid, and that's exactly what it gives you. The moment that you are confronted with other groups, that's when certain things come out. Other groups are a big threat to the religious group. A person like me, for example, is also a big threat to many people that still live there, many of my friends that stayed there. And that's why I try to avoid a lot of this conversation, because I lived their life and it was not good enough for me. What does it mean about them? I asked many questions that I couldn't find answers for. Maybe they don't want to ask these questions because maybe for them it will be the end of their life there. So again, to your question, I would not consider them radical until they meet another group that challenges a lot of what they think, because then they will go deeply into the group, and that's when strong ideas come out.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much for letting us.
This is
Go.
again a lot of psychological stuff, but when you deal with trying to help people and stop them from taking their life sometimes, you realize that you have to really think about it and then think about yourself. And yeah.
So, on a more positive note, again, thank you for telling us all of these intimate details that I and all of our participants, we cherish them. Thank you. I'd like to ask you about this wonderful story that when you were 16, you got a full-time job working as a kitchen assistant in a cafe. Your boss, his name was Daniel, and he was completely blind. Tell us about him.
Yes. So when I was 16, I managed to graduate high school externally. I started to plan my life away from where I grew up. And yeah, basically I needed to get some money, and I found a job as a kitchen helper at the cafe of Daniel. Daniel is an amazing person. He, as a soldier during a devastating war called Yom Kippur War, one of Israel's most terrible wars, he got injured. He's not sure exactly what happened, whether it was a bomb that exploded while he was in his Jeep, or whether it was a anti-tanks rocket that hit their Jeep. Something happened. He woke up almost a year later. On and off, he had a hole in his head, and he became completely blind. He basically lost his eyesight, and for him, he thought that life is over. But thanks a lot to the support around him, and also for his will to live, he managed to slowly recover. He was in physiotherapy even when I met him years later, in around 2010 or so. Basically he recovered, and eventually he opened a restaurant and a factory and even a cafe chain. And I worked in one of these cafes. And meeting a person like that was a transformational experience. I started to work for him as a kitchen helper. And one of the key elements of my experience is realizing that actually everybody was taking advantage of him. As a blind person, we could not see what's going on, unfortunately. And so whether it was some of the other employees, his manager, the suppliers, everybody was taking advantage of his disability, whether it was hiding products like produce, hiding the rotten ones in the bottom of a box so he could only feel the top, because he was very independent. He tried to do everything by himself, so he wanted to test everything. Whether it was his manager that was inviting all his friends for free to eat at the cafe, and nobody would say anything. And for me, it bothered a lot. And so after 3 months of working there, I started to ask customers what they think about the cafe, identifying a lot of problems. Actually, there was a boycott on the cafe by the customers, because this cafe was inside the courthouse in my city where I lived at the time after the settlement. And the lawyers did not want to buy from the place anymore. And figuring out why and how to solve it, I quickly rose from the kitchen helper to managing the whole place. And that's when my relationship with Daniel became very close. We became friends. We had a lot of deep talks, and the result of these deep talks is the book, My Blind Boss.
So, Sagit, what comes to my mind is that have they no shame taking advantage of a wounded soldier, a veteran who was fighting on their behalf?
Apparently not. He was a very successful man. He was also he is still there. He is also a very difficult man. He was not so easy to work with. A lot of what I'm writing in the book is meaning that I extracted from his life, not necessarily meaning that he immediately conveyed to everybody that met him. Many of the employees that worked there did not have the same relationship I had with him. And many of them simply did not care. It's reality, it's real life. To me, it was first of all my first job. I really wanted to prove myself. He did me a favor. Hiring a 16-year-old guy with zero experience is really something that I was grateful for every day that I came to work. And beside that, I really wanted him to succeed. I thought that his story is just amazing. And so I came to him one day with a list of things, and I thought that I needed to change, from the menu to pricing, to the suppliers. And he just said to me, just go for it. And the amount of trust he gave me opened the door for me. And I remember walking all over the city looking for suppliers to find better bread and better vegetables, whatever I knew how to do. I remember talking to the customers, memorizing their names, creating loyalty programs for him, changing the menu, many things that were just instinctive, but made a huge difference. And when he realized that, he fired his manager, and that's how I got in. I was in charge also of training any new employee. So basically, at the age of between 16 to 17, I had basically the reins to do everything I thought was right at the place. And it was a transformational experience.
Wow. And so how many years did you work for him?
Yeah, I mean, since it was never my goal to work there, my goal was to leave the country and to start my life over somewhere. I was still part of the group, and leaving the group while being there is not that easy. And also, I wanted to explore the world. I didn't know anything about the world, but I wanted to go out. And so I worked for him for a year. That was very intense year. It was full with activity. It felt like a much longer, but it was just a year.
And tell me, so when you began, I mean, it's hard to think that working for a blind man would be easy. It must have been very difficult. Was the work enjoyable?
Yes and no. On the one hand, again, when somebody puts so much trust in you, you want to prove them right. That's why one of the lessons I talk about also is to know to trust, sometimes blindly, in this word again, but to know to trust because people want to prove themselves. Often it's the case that entrepreneurs are micromanaging and trying to keep a lot for themselves. He also sometimes tried to micromanage, but he was not capable to some extent. He could not see practically what's going on. Mm-hmm. So on that hand, I enjoyed the freedom very much. On the other hand, again, he was very suspicious. He also was sometimes quite depressed. We had a lot of talks when a lot of his personal story came up. And I had often the job also of cheering him up, of making him look at the positive side, not understanding at all what he has been through. And so it was challenging, but it gave a lot of meaning to the experience.
So Sagi, My Blind Boss, your new book that's just about to be published, why did you choose to write it? Why? And tell us about the book. Tell us about why you wrote it.
Yeah, so the book is called the My Blind Boss 10 Challenges How to Overcome, or 10 Lessons How to Overcome Any Challenge. And there are many reasons why I wrote the book. On a personal level, every lesson that I mentioned there is something that I'm applying in my life and has really helped me overcome many of my challenges that I'm experiencing even today in Corona time, as an entrepreneur in the tourism industry, or as a person that left his family and moved to the end of the world, to Vancouver, Canada. These lessons are really something that I apply every day. I also think that Daniel is the ultimate entrepreneur in my eyes. What many people don't understand about entrepreneurship is that there is very small difference between being an entrepreneur and being blind in the more, let's say, spiritual, philosophical level. Entrepreneurship is full of uncertainty. Like you said at the beginning, it's full with risk. Now, for a blind person, taking a step forward is a risk sometimes. It can hit a wall, it can fall, and yet he will do it every day, and one step and another step and another step, trusting that he's going the right way, trusting that everything will be fine. Also maybe working on his other senses to become more capable with what he has already. And this is exactly what entrepreneurship is like. We are all blind. We all don't know exactly what will happen. And when we think we know, then suddenly something like Corona comes and hits you. And now you have to overcome that. I mean, now in the situation that we are in today, we are completely blind. And so we have to embrace it. And I think that that's why he is a true inspiration.
So, other than this, what seems to me more of a professional, business-oriented takeaway, what are some of the other takeaways of the book?
The lessons are divided between the, like you said, the professional ones and also personal ones. One lesson that I start with is gratitude, for example. Now, every inspirational self-help book focuses on gratitude and how important it is and how you should stand in front of the mirror and tell yourself that you love yourself every day, and then everything will be great and you will love yourself. And to me, what I focus on in the book is the struggle of gratitude, and actually the struggle of all these inspirational lessons, and then how Daniel coped with them, sometimes yes, sometimes no, to make you first of all understand that it's okay to struggle with things like gratitude. I cannot imagine how a person that lost his eyesight, after being able to see the world, not being able to see it anymore, having to learn how to walk again, through physiotherapy, how can he be grateful every day and say how wonderful life is? To me, it was always, every conversation with him was like, was sometimes really shocking. It was realization about my life. And so these are the kind of lessons that I mentioned from a personal view. I talk a lot about fear and how, again, like what I said before, how we are all blind in a way. We just tell ourselves that we are not. We think that we know what's going to happen, and eventually we really don't. And we should maybe learn a bit more from blind people, how they cope with it and how they overcome the fear of uncertainty and the fear of darkness in front of them. I also talk a lot about how to take advantage of these hardships that happen to you, because one of the key things that happened with Daniel that are really interesting is that Daniel found out that if you got injured, you're actually eligible to win or to participate in governmental bids. And he found out that actually he can open cafes in courthouses all over the country because he will get the right for it as a person that got injured while serving in the military. So he found out the key strength in his terrible situation, and completely utilized it to open a chain of cafes. And when you really analyze the hardships that happen to you and find in it the advantages that it gives you, it's really amazing. And while everybody, many books mention it as some kind of a cliche, make the best of the bad that happens to you, I bring a very practical example of how he did it. He found the legal element to it and managed to overcome it. Wow. Another thing that I'll say briefly for time reasons is the fact that he needed to trust people, and how to trust the people around you, how to share your mission with other people and make them understand that working with you is not just the actual work. For me, when I worked with him, one thing that he managed to do very well is make me see the bigger mission in what I'm doing. And that was a beautiful thing. Now, when I described Secret Vienna, and I said it as an ideological meaning to transform people's lives through their vacation, this is something I learned from him, because suddenly small things that you do become very meaningful.
So in other words, it's not about making money in a business. The business is actually about something bigger than that, and the money is kind of a byproduct.
It sounds a lot like a cliche. Many people talk about it's money. It's not about the money. At the end of the day, I had a conversation with Daniel, and we were sitting there, and I told Daniel, aren't you happy with everything that you achieved? He had a home, he had a family with grandchildren even, a cafe chain, a restaurant, he had a personal driver. Everything that I, as a professional entrepreneur, want to achieve. To me, I would look at his life and I will be very content with everything he had. And yet, every time we talked about this, he told me how he would trade everything for his eyesight. He would give everything, all the company away, all the money that he earned. He would rather be a seeing homeless person than being a wealthy blind person. And this was a truly shocking experience for me, hearing that, because everything that I aspire to in my life, he will trade for something that I have by default. Yeah, it's something that I don't even think about, and rarely value. And it made me really question, what am I valuing in my life? And this is something that I focus on a lot in the book, because again, most self-help books assume that the goal is success, and the goal is and success is measured by tangible elements that can show that you made it. And I'm not focusing on that. I'm not assuming that you want success. I'm asking you, what is the thing that you will value? What is the thing that you will trade everything else for? Like he did. Sometimes you'll find that these are things that you have already, and so suddenly everything that you actually strive for will transform. It can be then that actually what you do right now is meaningful enough and is good enough. You just have to find the meaning in that thing and focus on that meaning. So for me, not just offering tours, something that is insignificant, but changing people's lives through their vacation. You know, these are lessons that I'm focusing on the book, and I'm not telling people that they strive to be successful. I'm telling people that they have to strive to define success for them, the things that they will not give up on, and that they will trade everything else for.
So now we've talking about success and the steps to success on a very theoretical level. For you, Sagi Silberschatz, CEO, entrepreneur, what do these lessons from My Blind Boss look like in a practical sense?
Yeah. So for me, the experience with Daniel was very transformational. A lot of the lessons that I learned from him, I extracted while struggling in my life slightly later. I had many flashbacks into the conversations, and that's when I pulled out the meaning that I wanted to get from this interaction with him. So after my work with him, I decided to leave everything behind, moved to Canada, that chose the place on the map that was the furthest away that I could find, just so I can start fresh somewhere new. And imagine somebody who is 17 starting life it was my first time abroad. My English was not that good. I started to work in sales, selling all kind of products, mainly toys, trying to find my place. And you can imagine how difficult this can be. You're thrown into a world you never knew, and you have to make something out of it. And this is when all the lessons that I learned from him came. When I started then my business in Austria, or moving to Austria, or everything really that involves risk and uncertainty, I immediately go back to Daniel, and I take one of these lessons that are mentioned in the book, and I really try to set an example. Many people that know me know that one of the reasons why it took me long to publish the book is I wanted to make sure that everything I write there is consistent with my life. I don't want to write anything that I didn't do and that worked for me. And that's why sometimes I had still modifications to make, where I'm now very close to the end, but yeah.
Wow. So Sagi, I'd like to ask, I think we have here some questions, time for some questions from the audience.
Sure.
Do we have any questions here from anybody? So online or offline, please turn on your microphone, join the conversation, send a chat message to us. Sagi is there to answer your questions. And so please don't be shy. So I want to go on. So Sagi, so how, when is the book going to be available? When can people pre-order already?
Yeah, people can pre-order through the website. It's really, it's having its finishing touches. I'm sure that everybody will benefit from being patient a bit about this. And the reason why I'm talking about the book before is so people will be aware that it's going to come out, but it will be very soon. Everybody will get an update about it. And yes, a lot of the things that I'm also mentioning are things that are actually things that I'm facing right now in the current situation. But to me, it was always important that the book will be told, first of all, through Daniel, not having another young person preaching you how to live your life, but rather just my lessons from a person who really can open your eyes to how to improve yourself and how to really act on what you want to act on.
And Sagi, I'd like to ask, so if you had one lesson from the book that you'd want to share with us tonight, what would that lesson be?
Sure. Yeah, this is a good question because each lesson can relate to somebody else's experience or situation at the moment. But there is one lesson that is always on my mind, always sits in my head, that forces me to do things every time I feel that I'm stuck or every time I feel scared of taking action. And it's basically a simple question, which is, what is my excuse? The thing is that we all have big dreams and we all want to achieve something. That's everybody. We all look for inspiration, for motivation, and then we hear many speakers, gurus, and others telling us how we should pursue things and how we should overcome these feelings. And then what we do in our head is we develop excuses for why not, or why their circumstances help them become successful, but I don't have these circumstances. And to me, one thing that I took from Daniel is that Daniel shattered all my excuses. With Daniel, a person that cannot go to the toilet by himself, cannot open the door, cannot see where he is sometimes, to open a business, I simply, every time I think about this, I ask myself, if he did it, what is my excuse? I mean, some people say, oh, he succeeded because he lives in the United States, where the opportunities are endless, because he had connections. I mean, this guy, he's blind. This guy had nothing. Even if he had all these things, he could not practically see. And to me, this really eliminated any kind of reasoning my mind came up with why I should not do something. And that's one thing that I like as a powerful lesson. So everybody in their head will ask themselves this question, and I'm sure it will push people to take a lot of action in their life.
Hey, wow.
I have a question. My name is Rudy. Sagi, I have a question for you. Do you think Daniel would have achieved all the same things if he wouldn't have become blind? I mean, it's of course very open question, but what's your take on that?
That's a great question. One thing that was a motivation for Daniel is something that is also a source of motivation for many people, is that he was told that his recovery is going to take years, that he will probably have little to no chance to do something. He should rely on government support and some grants that will help him go by, and maybe he will find a job in some social project that will help him have some kind of life. And that's something I remember when I talked about this with him, and I asked him also, what is your motivation in all of this?
Mm-hmm.
His motivation was always to prove people that despite being blind, he can do all of this. He simply is capable of doing all of this. And he took his disability and his event. He was very busy trying to understand, why did it happen to him? You know, what did he do? Why did he deserve such fate? And to him, he realized that it was this event that happened to him that kind of uncovered a cause for him. And the cause was to show blind people that it's possible. He became also a leader of blind people in Israel that for the rights, like he stood for the rights of blind people, especially in his condition that were injured for military service. So he embraced in his better days, he embraced the event that happened to him as motivation, and it pushed him a lot. I don't know what would have happened if he did not become blind. He was always he always said that he had many dreams before, but yeah, this is a question we'll never know. The thing is that once he became blind, he embraced it and wanted to prove everybody wrong. I think this is huge motivational sources.
Well,
it's not only that he embraced it. This is Dr. D talking here, but he accepted his disability and was able to get his mind around it and be able to work with it. I also want to quickly add that this talk, Sim and everybody, this is really a fantastic talk. You've got a lot to say, and I'll be anxious to look at your book when it comes out.
I appreciate it. Thank you very much.
You're
You're
welcome.
absolutely right. The thing is that I like to say is that he embraced it and he accepted it and he used his disability in his good days. It was changing. It was a constant battle with his mind, constant questions that came up again and again. And that's something that's very important to remember, that we all struggle with the questions when something terrible happens to us. Why us? And we then suddenly become courageous and we take it and we make something good out of it. But then another thing happens and we again face these questions. And maybe this is life. And eventually it's about how many times you can win this battle against your mind and embrace what happens to you.
Good. So, any other questions about Secret Vienna, counterterrorism, My Blind Boss, firing muskets in the center of Vienna?
Or anything else?
Well, in this case, I have good news because Sagi, as I said in the introduction, loves to talk with people, with anyone who's interested and wants to overcome challenges. He's clearly a very accessible person. So why don't we have a look at how to stay in touch with Sagi then?
Yeah, there are many ways.
We have here his website, sagisobashat.com. There it is. And he has contact us. I think his he can be contacted by phone, internet, WhatsApp, any of those things. Go there it is. Perfect. Okay. There we have it. So Sagi, it's I take it for granted that you'd love it if people would reach out to you.
Absolutely. I'm very happy to share and learn from everybody and share also the story. And yeah, will be very happy. I thank everybody who dedicated their time to listen. And I hope it was valuable for everybody. And it was a great pleasure.
In that case, then I'd like to thank very much Sagi Sobashat. Thank you for sharing your life, for sharing your intimate life. I mean to say that your personal life with your family and everything, and growing up in the settlement with all of your work and your inspiration with your blind boss. I look forward to reading the book, and we look forward to meeting you again here at the Student Hotel Vienna. Thanks very much to our production team for all of their hard work making this thing happen live here at the Student Hotel and online. And to our generous sponsors, of course, the Student Hotel Vienna, where we are streaming live here from tonight. And of course, you, the participants. Without you here live and online, our show just wouldn't be worthwhile. And that's why we do it, so that we can make this community. So thank you very much. So from Vienna, from the Student Hotel Vienna, good night, and we'll see you next week.